Chapter 10 Rainy Days equals bonding. It's been a week since Wilbur's set off with Phil to search for Tommy, and it's been 3 weeks since Wilbur got separated from Tommy. 3 entire weeks without his little brother at his side. 3 entire weeks, and then some, since Wilbur lost sight of the very reason he is still kicking like hell in this world. He won't lie. The worry is very nearly tearing him apart. Even from when Wilbur was young, his main concern, his main attention, was always Tommy. Keeping him safe, keeping him fed, keeping him warm. That was his mission as an older brother. It's always just been them both. And when the apocalypse hit, it became a mission of keeping Tommy alive and safe from the new dangers that have popped up. Starvation and the cold became something that stared them both in the face, and those creatures that were always looking for something to kill didn't help either. So, Wilbur adapted. He gave his all and put all his energy into not just surviving, but making sure Tommy would be all right. Raising a kid in this world is hardly a piece of cake. Wilbur isn't even sure he was doing all right beforehand, but this is the best he can do. Curling up around Tommy during the night to keep the cold away and keep him warm. That's something he can do. Sacrificing his own rations to give Tommy a better meal. That's something he will do. Killing those horrible, disgusting monsters that are a constant threat. That is something he has to do. Even with the sickly fear that comes with bashing in a zombie's head. Wilbur likes to say it gets easier with time, but honestly, there will always be that quiet disgust in the back of his mind. A small voice saying that he would rather do anything than kill this thing. He ignores it in favor of protecting Tommy. At the very start of all this shit, Wilbur had been one of the people who killed a zombie very early on. When it first started, there was the general confusion, the slow realization that made people falter and eventually become victims to a zombie on the road. Wilbur had caught on quick enough when he saw someone get mauled to death in front of him. Then that zombie had noticed Wilbur, noticed Tommy hiding behind him, and Wilbur didn't have anything to attack with except for the precious guitar in his hands. Well, he would burn every guitar in the world if it meant keeping Tommy away from those things. Tommy had screamed, and Wilbur swung, bashing the end of his guitar into the zombie's head and sending it flying into a wall. He ended up breaking the guitar, but with the rising panic of an oncoming apocalypse, that was left behind and forgotten. Then they had to run, seeking shelter and safety, finding it and losing it, searching for it again. Throughout it all, Wilbur held Tommy's hand and made sure that he would always be a shield between his little brother and the undead. But now, Wilbur is not there for Tommy at all. Now, when he wakes up in the morning, he has to go through the same repeating panic of, where's Tommy? Where has he gone? Only to remember that he isn't there at all. Instead, he's alone with a group that will hopefully keep him safe, and Wilbur is with a man who seems too kind to be true. Wilbur is wary of Phil at first, he'll admit, but it's easy to warm up to him when the guy is so friendly and earnest about his well-being. When Wilbur wakes up, it's with a gasping breath and a near scream. Phil doesn't mention it, but he does sit beside Wilbur and rambles on about anything he can think of. He often tells of the towns he's visited before, of the people he's met. At first, it seemed like just a frantic attempt to keep Wilbur from slipping into a full-blown panic. But now, it feels like routine. Hearing Phil's stories, hearing his adventures. Now, Wilbur asks for them, because listening to a man's travels is better than thinking about how scared Tommy must be without Will at his side. Plus, he likes the sound of Phil's laugh. Wilbur never had any close friends throughout the apocalypse, but if things go well, Wilbur hopes to part ways with Phil being someone he can trust, maybe even depend on. Phil's first story that he ever tells Wilbur is right after Wilbur wakes up too early in the morning, tears streaming down his face. He's able to somewhat get himself together by the time Phil stirs, but it's still not enough to hide the fact he was sobbing quietly just a few minutes prior. So, Phil just starts talking. Did you know I once visited a community that had pet parrots? Wilbur blinks, wiping at his face for what feels like the 100th time. His eyes feel rubbed raw by this point. You've what? Parrots. Colorful ones, too. Apparently, the people rescued them from some apartment. A person must have owned them before all this shit went down. There were about 7, I think? Real cute, too. One of them kept landing on my hat as I tried to get around. Wilbur snorts, trying to picture the image of Phil walking around with a bird on his head. Bet that one was your favorite. Maybe. Phil shrugs, a stupid little smile on his face. I really wish I could have taken one with me, although it would have been hard to take care of one on the go. Imagine that, though, coming across the survivor with a bird on his head. You'd probably think I was crazy. We're all a little crazy here, Wilbur hummed, Phil not denying. Did they have names? Well, I don't remember most of them. I know the one that kept sitting on my hat was named a Nugget, though. Wilbur had burst out laughing at that, and the morning had seemed a little brighter. When they continued on their way to travel towards where Dream's group might have gone, Phil only continued to fill the silence, and in turn, also kept Wilbur's mind from wandering into anything bad. Have you ever driven a car during the past year? Phil asks, Wilbur easily answering that question. No, he hadn't even driven a car before the apocalypse. Him and Tommy often just traveled on the sidewalk. But I'm guessing you're going to say you have? How the fuck did you manage to get a working car? Well, it wasn't really working, Phil thinks for a bit, trying to recall. And I didn't really drive it, per se. I just steered it as it went down a hill. Crashed right into a building. Got away fine, though. Not as bad as the last time I was in a crash. Was that one before or after the zombies? Wilbur asks dryly. Phil just laughs. After, around there, when everything was still in chaos, I got into a bad car crash with a friend. He got away fine, but holy shit. I swear I thought I was going to die. Phil grins, shaking his head even with the bad memory. We were surrounded by an entire horde, too. I don't even know how I got away. That's a shitty way to start off the apocalypse. Sure is, Phil chimes, and he tilts his head to Wilbur. But we move on, and we grow. Surviving in this world is only half of it, you know? We also have to live. Wilbur had faltered at that, and he scrambles to give a proper response. I get that. Me and Tommy have our own things to keep us going. Yeah? Phil raises his eyebrow. Like what? He asks. He says it gently, like he's careful of Wilbur refusing to answer. We have routines, or habits, I would say, even with the zombies. I still want him to be in wonder of the world, so we enjoy the little things. Wilbur gives up a glance towards the sky, where dark clouds block out the sun, like the rain. Phil looks up with him. Good source of water. Good atmosphere to dance in, Wilbur smiles, and Phil looks at him with an intrigued look. Whenever it rains, me and Tommy dance around in the puddles for a while, just enjoying the weather. He loves it, particularly when we're in the mud. Although, I'll say, it's hard to get the mud out of his clothes after he rolls around in it. Phil laughs, warm and nearly fond. That sounds sweet. It's nice, Wilbur nods. He's a horrible dancer, but I'm not much better, to be fair. Phil cackles at that, shaking his head as Wilbur's heart fills with a quiet worry. Maybe it'll rain soon for us, Phil notes, looking up and across the sky, squinting at where the clouds seem particularly dense. I'm not dancing, though. Well, I can't dance alone, Wilbur says, and it feels like he can hear Tommy's voice in his ears right now, a hand tugging at his own, insisting that Wilbur go join him. It's all right, though. I'd rather hold off dancing till... Hold that thought. Phil cuts him off, grabbing Wilbur by the arm and pulling him to the side, holding out a gun and shooting it, landing a bullet right into the head of a zombie, half hidden underneath a car they were walking beside. Wilbur jolts with the bang, and he stares at the body on the ground for a bit longer than needed, Phil and him standing still. Sorry, Phil grins, apologetically, and Wilbur blinks up at him with a shake of his head. No, that startled me, Wilbur sighs, Phil still holding on to his arms, and he gives Phil a small squeeze before letting go. Thanks. Phil hums, looking around the street. I think we should hurry on walking, because that might have alerted a few more than just this one. Wilbur frowns at the sight of a few more zombies coming out from the shadows of broken, abandoned buildings. For fuck's sake. Phil! I reacted on reflex. Phil holds his hands up in defense, his gun still held in one hand. I see zombie, I kill zombie. And now you've called the zombies too. And I have my own axe and everything. Wilbur huffs, looking behind him at the few strays approaching them. Whatever, just run, he says, quickly walking down the street. Phil follows at his heels with a quiet wheeze. We could kill them off, Phil suggests. I would have thought you would want to save the bullets. I was thinking more than you use your axe. So you want me to kill them? I see. No, that's not what I'm saying. You're expecting me to do all the work is what you're implying. That's not very polite of you, Phil. Oh, fuck off. Phil shoves his shoulder, and Wilbur takes it as motivation to run faster. Hey, don't leave me behind. Run faster then. Wilbur laughs, and Phil may curse him out, but he's still smiling along. They continue to run, and after, they'll continue to talk. Wilbur tells Phil of Tommy, and in return, Phil will give stories of his own. The conversation doesn't quite keep away the ache in Wilbur's chest and the fear that settles on his shoulders, but it's enough to keep him from wanting to curl up into a ball and sob. He still has nightmares, though. Phil only really mentions it on their 4th day of travel, the two of them huddled by a fire, taking shelter in the middle of a poorly made barrier. It's late at night, but Phil still keeps watch, and keeps the fire going bright as Wilbur wakes up with a startle. Will can't recall what his dream had been about, but Tommy's name had been on the tip of his tongue, and he had barely bit it back with the knowledge of any nearby strays being able to hear him. Phil sits at the fire with a dazed-off look, one hand resting on the axe at his side, and his other hand supporting his chin as he leans his elbow on one of his knees. He's sitting just beside Will, too close for him to not have heard anything, and Wilbur hesitantly raises his head to him with an expectation of some sort of question. And Phil does ask, but not in a prying manner. "You all right?" he questions, eyes not leaving the fire, his face lit up from the light of the flames. The night has been pretty quiet for the most part. I think a stray did pass by earlier, but it didn't see us, just walked past. Wilbur doesn't sit up from where he's laying down on the ground, but he turns his head to Phil. "That's good." He nods. I can take watch, if you want, since I'm already up." "You didn't answer my question," Phil reminds him gently. He sounds not quite tired, but rather subdued. Quiet, calm, yet still perfectly on guard. Wilbur doesn't think Phil ever loses that watchful glint in his eyes. "You okay?" "Of course," Wilbur gives an answer nearly instantly. "You mumble in your sleep," Phil points out, and Wilbur goes still. "I know it's not really my place, but I worry." Wilbur sighs, turning his head up towards the cracked roof over their heads, closing his eyes. "I just miss him." "Tommy?" "Mm-hmm." Wilbur feels a tug in his chest, and for a second he thinks he's about to burst into tears, but he reels it back. "God, we've never been separated like this before, you know? I mean, there were times when we'd part ways just for a bit, but that was when we were in a safe town, and that was only for a few hours at a time, at most. Now, I don't know where he is, or if he's all right, and he could..." Wilbur's voice wavers dangerously, and he cuts himself off. "I'm sure he's okay, mate," Phil reassures. "Even in a world like this, people would want to protect a kid. He'll be safe, at least because of others' kindness. I'm sorry you both got separated." "It's not your fault," Wilbur chokes out. "Just the fucking zombie apocalypses. Those things on the street have always been a threat to everyone. I blame the Horde." Phil stays silent for a moment longer, and Wilbur takes a few seconds to bite back the urge to cry. Even with the sheer worry and grief that's ripping through him right now, he rubs at his eyes, turning his head to Phil again. "Wilbur, Phil starts, trailing off, narrowing his eyes toward the fire. He hesitates for a second, too, then continues. "I promise you that you're going to be all right. You and Tommy." It doesn't sound like he was really going to say that, but Wilbur doesn't press against it, and instead just slowly processes Phil's words. "I'm not your responsibility," Wilbur huffs. "I can get by on my own." "For now, you are," Phil insists. "I'm the one who agreed to help you look for Tommy, aren't I?" Wilbur frowns. "That doesn't mean I expect you to risk your life for me." "I risk my life for anyone," Phil shrugs. "It's the least I could do." Wilbur's face scrunches up into something displeased, but then he yawns, and Phil just gives a small laugh. "I'll take watch," Wilbur offers, but Phil just waves a hand. "You're still healing from the wound on your head, mate. Go back to sleep." Wilbur's expression turns a bit grumpy at the mention of his injury, but he's been healing just fine for the past few days. He's hardly even had headaches. "You've hardly slept at all. I'll wake you up in 2 hours or so, and then I'll rest," Phil bargains. 1 hour. 2. 1! Phil snorts. "All right, I'll wake you up in 1 hour." Wilbur sniffs, satisfied with that, and he turns over on his side, staring at the fire and letting them both fall back into silence. He stares at the flames and eventually closes his eyes, drifting off with a small whisper of something safe surrounding him. "Good night, Will," Phil says, and Wilbur doesn't answer back, sound asleep. "You need help with that?" Technoblade asks, setting down a bucket in the street, pushing back hair out of his face. "I got it," Tommy insists, holding 2 large buckets by the handles, dragging them out in the middle of the road. "I'm a strong man. I eat carrots." Technoblade snorts as Tommy drops the buckets down, leaning over them to watch the rain already start to collect. It's raining a bit less than before, but it's still coming down, and Technoblade would like to take advantage of the water. He's got plenty of water stocked away in the storage house, but he will take whatever he can get. After Tommy's tired himself out with the dancing and the spinning around and jumping into the puddles, Technoblade puts them both to work by setting out buckets onto the street. These are going to be heavy to bring back inside, Tommy notes, trying to imagine the weight of the water in the buckets he just carried out. They're going to be stuck here. I'll carry them in, Technoblade shrugs, counting the buckets they've placed out into the rain and deeming it good enough. He wonders if he should try going for a patrol today, even with the rain, although Tommy had insisted upon the two of them staying inside. He looks back at Tommy to find him trying to eat the rainwater, mouth open wide towards the sky. There's a certain fondness that comes with seeing the kid doing something so childish, eyes scrunched up so no droplets will fall into his eyes, his tongue sticking out as he squints up at the clouds. He pushes his wet hair back, trying earnestly to catch the rain. Techno's decided. Today is a lazy day. Come on, Technoblade says, walking back towards the apartment. No, wait. I've almost got it, Tommy says, sticking out his tongue again. I'm eating the rain. It is delicious. Fine dining. Come eat breakfast instead. Tommy gives a grumpy noise, but he does follow, and Technoblade wrings out his own hair as they walk back under the shelter of the roof. I want to go back to sleep now. Bath first, Technoblade insists. Then food. Then you can go to sleep. Then I won't be tired anymore, Tommy frowns, his shoes leaving wet footprints against the ground as they both go back up to the apartment. We'll see about that. Techno just hums, and Tommy gives a puff of air that's almost like a scoff. The food inside has gone cold by now, and Technoblade just puts it to the side in favor of making a quick bowl of soup. Floof has moved from underneath the kitchen table to on top of the couch, and he sleeps peacefully as Tommy walks beside him, his clothes still soaking wet, his hair flat against his head. Floof, you should have come with us. You would have loved the rain, Tommy says, patting at the dog's snout. Floof only opens his eyes and blinks at Tommy with a huff. We should go play fetch in the rain. Go take a bath, Techno calls out from the kitchen, and Tommy gives an upset noise. I'm going! Tommy frowns, turning back to Floof. He is a bitch, Floof. A big one. Floof just yawns, and Tommy gives the dog a nice pat on the head before heading off to take a bath and change into some dry clothes. He only changes into another set of pajamas rather than actual clothes, and by the time he comes out, Techno's sitting at the kitchen table, clean, dry, clothes on, and hair out of its usual braid hanging over his shoulders. They eat. Tommy sneaks a piece of chicken to Floof as he walks underneath the kitchen table, and Technoblade writes down something in his journal. The rain continuing to pour down outside, it feels strange and calm, and truly safe within the walls of this apartment. It feels like home. By the time Technoblade looks up from his writing, Tommy's already finished his food, and then he's dozing off at the table with his head resting against his arms. Technoblade smiles, closing the book and putting it to the side, then reaching forward and poking at Tommy's arm. Hey, he speaks quietly. Go sleep in bed. Ugh. Tommy lifts his head with a yawn, squinting at Technoblade. It's cold, he says, and Techno gives a little frown. That's why you should go warm up. I don't want to sleep alone. Then I'll go with you, Techno shrugs. I also don't want to walk. Technoblade narrows his eyes at Tommy, who gives a stupid little smug look in response. I'm not carrying you. But I'm tired, Tommy sighs, resting his chin on the table. Actually, I'll sleep here. You're not sleeping in the kitchen. Good night. Technoblade sighs, rolling his eyes before getting up off his chair and heading off towards the bedroom. Tommy lifts his head up with a rush. Where are you going? To sleep, Techno answers, hearing the screech of a chair being pushed back. Wait! Technoblade ignores the footsteps of someone following him, and instead just walks right into his room, circling around the bed and sitting down with a quiet sigh. How is it that he's done nothing yet feels so tired? He blames Tommy. Hey! Tommy exclaims, standing at the doorway with his hand against the doorknob. Hello. Technoblade pats the spot next to him, and Tommy gives a happy smile. He climbs onto the bed and curls right underneath the blankets, sticking his cold hands onto Techno's face. Look how cold my hands are, he says, slapping his palms over Techno's cheek, and Technoblade makes a face at the chill that sticks to Tommy's skin. He pulls Tommy's hands off by the wrist, cupping his hands in his own so they can at least warm up a little. Why aren't your hands cold? Maybe because I didn't dip my hands into a puddle outside, Techno responds, squeezing Tommy's fingers lightly, and Tommy scrunches his nose a bit with a frown. Get under the blankets, you're still too cold. You'll get sick. Technoblade does have medicine stored away, just in case, but he'd prefer for the kid to not get sick at all. I'm already underneath the blanket, Tommy huffs, falling onto his back with a sigh, then tugging at the blankets until it's just at his nose, his eyes poking out and staring at Techno with a curious look. I never get sick. Only idiots get sick. Exactly. Tommy blinks, not seeming to catch it for a moment, and Techno just takes the moment to lay down properly as Tommy slowly processes his words and lets out an angry little noise, a foot flying out and whacking Techno in the shin from underneath the blankets. Techno just snorts, laying down beside Tommy and pulling his damp pink hair out over his shoulder, braiding it absent-mindedly. This is much better than walking around, Tommy declares. Techno, rolling his eyes at the bit of sass he hears in his voice. Look, even Floop is sleeping. It's a sleep day. He points at the dog in the corner of the room, sleeping on his own comfy bed. Then go to sleep, Techno says simply. I am. I will. Watch, Tommy says, shoving his face into the pillow. I'm sleeping. Good for you. Techno smiles softly, his hands undoing the braid he's just made, and then redoing it again. They both fall into a calm silence, the sound of rain pouring outside. Then, what if I was the Zombie King? Techno turns to Tommy. The what? Even with the way Tommy seems to slowly lose energy and get more tired with each word, he goes on to detail how he's going to be the best zombie killer in existence, how he's going to kill every single zombie ever, and so he will become the Zombie King. Really? Technoblade wonders if Tommy is just rambling to keep his mind off of something. The way he talks too fast, just a little too frantic, it gives something away. How are you going to be king of the zombies if you're killing them all? I would be the king of everyone, not just the zombies, Tommy scoffs, eyes half closed. I'm just called the Zombie King because I killed all the zombies. It's a cool title, to make me sound cool. Of course. Technoblade goes to say something else, but then stops, letting the silence drag on. Tommy shifts around from where he's laying down. Do you think it's still going to be raining when we wake up? Maybe. Silence, then. Do you think the zombies get wet in the rain? Well, Techno shrugs. I don't think they care much about the water, so, yeah. Tommy seems to think again of something to ask. What's the biggest number of zombies you've seen? Technoblade thinks for a moment. He does not honestly know, but he'll give a good estimate. Hundreds. Oh, Tommy blinks. That's a lot. I've seen a lot of zombies, Technoblade admits, hands fiddling with his braid. Killed a lot of them, too. Tommy doesn't respond for a moment, eyes looking off into the distance, focused on something else. Technoblade waits for maybe another question, another random ramble, but instead, he gets a simple confession. You know, I think you can just be the king of zombie instead. Tommy mumbles. Techno's hands go still. I'll make you a crown if you want. I don't want to kill all the zombies. There's too many and he pauses, hesitates. Can I tell you a secret? Technoblade nods slowly, keeping his eyes pointed towards the ceiling. Sure. There's a beat of silence, and it drags on, Techno wondering if Tommy is going to say anything at all. I'm scared of them, Tommy admits, hardly a whisper. Of the zombies? Can I also tell you a secret? Techno asks, turning his head towards Tommy. Tommy looks at him with curious eyes, nodding. I'm scared of them too. Tommy blinks, face curling up into a small smile. That's okay, says, voice small. I won't tell anyone. Technoblade can't help but speak back in the same quiet voice. Promise? I promise. Tommy holds out a pinky finger. Pinky promise. We are both brave men who aren't scared of no zombies. Technoblade laughs a little, locking pinkies with Tommy. Yeah, we are. Wilbur wakes to a slight cold chill in the air and Phil's jacket over his shoulders. He blinks his eyes open to the brightness of the day, then notes that the day is a little dim. And also, that Phil did not wake him up. That liar. Good morning, Phil greets as Wilbur sits up from the ground. It's sprinkling. You said you were going to wake me up, Wilbur mutters out, rubbing at his eyes with a yawn. It's morning. Yep. Phil only grins, and he rummages through his bag to give some food to Wilbur. Want to wait the rain out, or do you want to keep moving? Wilbur frowns as he looks out towards the street, seeing the tiniest bit of rain from the sky. It's not too bad, but it's bound to make them both a little cold after a while. Wilbur chooses for the two of them to keep moving. They pack up their stuff and go on their way, wary of any zombies nearby while they were camping out for the night. Thankfully, there's nothing around, and they travel undisturbed. Until... Hold on. Phil holds out an arm to Wilbur, making them both stop in their tracks. Get down, he says, pulling Wilbur behind a wall, the two of them hiding out of sight. What? Wilbur says, following Phil's instructions, crouching down low as Phil glances out toward the street. What is it? People. Survivors? Wilbur presses. How many? 3, I think? Phil hums in the back of his throat. Maybe we should wait for them to pass by? Let me look, Wilbur says, and Phil moves to the side to let him see, looking out across the empty road. Wilbur spots the survivors that Phil had seen, and he stares for a while, seeing them get closer and closer, until Wilbur realizes he knows these survivors. Wait, Wilbur says, eyes wide as he leans closer to get a better look. He squints, hope filling up his heart. He counts the figures. 1, 2, 3. Just like Phil said, he recognizes 2 of the faces from here. He knows the one in the middle is Dream, but there's only 3 people. Wilbur's heart sinks right into his stomach as he gasps in a shuddering breath, and Phil grabs onto his shoulder. They don't have Tommy, Wilbur breathes out, and then immediately pulls away from Phil to go run towards Dream's group.